To the best of my opinion, I think Mr. Hignett's Horses is the longest running rocking horse manufacturer in the country. The great makers from London have all ceased to trade. Collinson's ceased to trade. There are other rocking horse makers, but none with such a long lineage. My grandfather was what you call a journeyman carpenter towards the end of the 1800s, and he saw these lovely horses, and he thought, well, I'm pretty sure I could make those. So he decided to change from being a journeyman carpenter to a rocking horse maker, and they thrived actually because, he was a very poor man. He couldn't write, he was totally illiterate, he couldn't do his numbers at all, but he managed to make sufficient money from the rocking horses to educate most of the family to university level. So my dad learnt to make rocking horses when he was young, obviously probably 10 or 11 years of age, and he carried on making them until he had to go to war in 1940. And the whole family was involved in making these horses. It was a family business, so they all had a little job. But all the boys went off to war, and the one sister, my auntie Josephine, she obviously stayed at home. Those who came back from the war actually got a different employment. They either became boffins or teachers or whatever, or there was two who wanted to make rocking horses, John and my father James, and there was a bit of a family dispute about the tools, I'm afraid, and John got back from the war earlier than James, and he took all the tools and started working for the Collinsons family, which was another rocking horse maker in Liverpool. Collinsons didn't fold until sometime in the 80s, when I started to make them myself in a room in the Gladstone Pottery Museum in Stoke-on-Trent. So I was making rocking horses then. I love to make them. I've always made them continuously since I was about 11. I love the smell of the wood, and the created object at the end is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing to make something that will be passed down through the generations. The joy of making the object is wonderful, so I like making them, and I'd love to be able to pass the skills on to the next generation. It starts with big planks of wood, and I have to gradually cut them down and use patterns to make them to smaller pieces which resemble the horse, and then I have to glue them all together, and the pieces are all very much larger than the horse will be eventually, and I cut it down using chisels and gouges and saws, exactly the same as my granddad did. It takes me about 3 weeks, I reckon, to make a single horse, but the only electrical things I do use a bit of sanding, electrical sander. My granddad definitely would have used one of those if they were available in those days, but all the other tools are exactly the same as he used, and I try to use vintage tools wherever I can because I think they're the best quality that you can buy. I do use some modern tools, but not many. They remind people of their childhood because, a lot of people had them when they were younger. They're a wonderful, soothing thing to ride. So it calms people down when they're on them. That's just a great thing for children. And they spur their imagination. And when they're on those rocking horses, they can imagine they're on any horse. They could be winning a great race. They could be in a charging in the Light Brigade or something like that. They could go to places that only a child's imagination can take them. So they're also very decorative objects, and they don't lose their value. Rocking horses, they'll cost you £1,000, £2,000 to buy new, but in 100 years' time they'll still be worth £1,000 or £2,000 in the currency of the time, whatever the inflation is. They'll last because they don't wear out. They go on and on and on. And the best customers for my grandfather were the two ocean liner companies. There was the White Star Line and the Cunard Line. And the White Star Line was the line that the Titanic was flagged under. And we're absolutely certain that there was at least one Mr. Hignett's rocking horse on the Titanic, because they were our biggest customer. And my grandmother Margaret used to go to down to the docks to collect the money. She would take the horses on a hand cart, take them down there, and then she'd come back put the money in the bag, and we'd have, well, I wasn't there, but the family would be able to eat, and all sorts of things were done with that money.